I see it is you've got two choices. You can either keep pretending like nothing bad's ever gonna happen to you, and then when it does, you're saying, uh-oh, or you can get ahead of what's coming so that when it does, not if, you're ready for it. And you're sitting pretty, sipping on Mai Tais next to the pool, working on that Caribbean suntan, because you got it covered. So folks, it's time for you to learn the truth about money. It's time for you to take back control of your money so that you are ready for what's about to happen. By doing that, you're setting yourself up for absolute success. No matter what comes your way, you're ready for it. And that's what I want for you, and I want to help you with that. So go to chrisnoggle.com and sign up for the Wealth Webinar. We do them every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and you need to be there because it's time.
For over 90 years, we've been crash testing our cars in the tireless pursuit of automotive safety. At Volvo, safety's been first since 1927. We've saved millions of lives with the invention of the three-point seatbelt in 1959. At Volvo, we've made driving safer for you and them. Visit safety.findlayvolvo.com to learn more.
So they say if you give a man a gun, he'll rob a bank. But if you give a man a bank, he'll rob everybody. The good news for you is Private Money Club runs solely on peer-to-peer relationships, which means no banks allowed. So finally, there's a community for real estate entrepreneurs where it is truly a win-win solution. This community is a place where you can connect with other lenders and other borrowers, and the end result's massive growth for you. You get to build your real estate empire, and you get to do it solving other people's problems. So if that sounds like a place you want to be, well then join us. Go to privatemoneyclub.com/Kelly. And if you want $500 off, just add the code Kelly500 and I'll knock $500 off the premier membership. We'll see you on the inside.
Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. For me, vibe has been something that I've just been able to unlock recently. And I tell you, this young man, his vibe will come through the screen. If you're watching, you'll see his face. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll see his heart more than his face. If you're listening, you're going to hear it through his voice. When he speaks about something, I could tell that he's believing in it, that he believes it at his core, and that's the reason why he's had the type of success with the people that he has. So I asked him if there was any titles, and he said, my name is simply Robert. That's who I am. I'm just some guy. He's not just some guy. He's a transformation coach that helps people to go from an employee mentality into an employer mentality or becoming the CEO of their life. This has been an incredible concept, and to be able to not only hear about it, but to be able to see it in him and the fact that he did it and now he's teaching it, I just think is absolutely phenomenal. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Robert Peterson.
Kelly, thanks so much, man. This is just an awesome pleasure. And you just gave me goosebumps, dude. Like,
well, Robert, I want to jump right in, man, because we were talking before we started recording, and we were talking about one of the biggest challenges in the church today. And you had talked about the fact that, you know, we're called to tithe, right? People are called to tithe, which is 10% of their income. But most people don't know what to do with the 90% that they get to keep. Can you help us with this?
man, I just, the crazy thing is we have this love-hate relationship with talking about money, right? This idea that money's evil, this idea that wanting to make money makes the person wanting it bad in some way. And it's just awkward and weird for no reason at all. Jesus actually taught about money more than he talked about anything else. And yet the church seems to be afraid to talk about money in ways that help people make more of it.
Why do you think that, Robert? Why do you think that is? Because, you know, with the kind of documentaries that you see today, especially the Hillsong one, I've been watching that. I've been watching the newest Hillsong one that just came out on Max. Watched the other one, and it was so sad because I remember I went to New York and I was there with Carl Lentz, and I was in the front row because I knew a friend, and they were like, oh, we got VIP seating and we got to be able to sit up front. And I experienced this, and it always makes me feel weird when a congregation starts to see their pastor as a god
Mm.
So how do you toe that line in teaching prosperity, but not prosperity gospel?
Man, the crazy thing is right. We elevate these leaders into a position above humanity, right? Above everyone in the room. And we know yet in our heart that every one of us is human. And scripture is pretty clear, right? That every one of us has sinned, and that includes the guy that's preaching in the pulpit. And this idea that they could be better than us or above us because they have this ability or this charisma, and because of their charisma, they attract a crowd and they attract people, and that's their vibe, right? And then of course the temptation becomes to take advantage of that because the sin becomes greater than the consequences, and they feel like they're above. Wow, I'm in this place above the law. I'm above the fold, and man, obviously all of us are open to temptation, and you hate to see somebody put into that position, and then their humanness comes out. It hurts the congregation, it hurts the person, and and it's of course not what God intended, right? um, Obviously all of us can fall subject to that and can get caught up in the money, can get caught up in the glamour, can get caught up in the fame, and I guess that's why I start each day in the Word and just try to be humble and try to give God the glory and gratefulness for what He's blessed me and my family with. And I think the biggest thing that I've been blessed with is a fantastic wife and amazing children, and that's my number one responsibility. And to do my family first is more important to me than business success or success in church or ministry.
There was a movie with Mia Jovovich. I'm going to kill her last name, but it was a story of Jeanne d'Arc, or Joan of Arc, and in the beginning of the movie, she said, "If you believe in God, you'll follow me." And they went into battle, and they had very, very few warriors, but they massively triumphed. Halfway through the movie, they're about to go into battle. They have more people, but they're still outnumbered. And she yells out to the people, "If you believe in me and you believe in God, you will follow me into battle." They do the battle. Half the people die, but they win the battle. At the end, the very epic battle, they have just as many people as the other people. And Jeanne d'Arc stands in front of everyone and says, "If you believe in me, you'll follow me into battle." They go. It wasn't equal. They actually outnumbered their opponent. They went into battle, and all of them died, and they lost the battle, and she died also. How do you teach somebody that prosperity? And when I say prosperity, the financial success, just the financial part of it, when you teach the financial part of it, how do you put bumpers in place that the person will not fall victim to the things that we see all the time?
Well, I think it's, where your focus goes, your energy flows. And if your focus is on yourself, then you're going to get caught up in yourself. If you keep your focus on God and recognize that whatever He's blessing you with, He expects you to do something for the kingdom with it in some shape or form, right? And that just means do good for humanity. It doesn't mean it has to be a specific church or a specific thing. Just do good for humanity. Keep yourself, and I think that's what will help keep you humble, right? Is the fact that God is blessing you because you're doing good for others. And as soon as you stop doing good for others, the blessing might not come anymore. And I think the difference between like the prosperity gospel and the idea of abundance is this idea that you could just pray for it and God will give it to you. The prosperity gospel that I come from, and this abundance mindset, is that God has given you a gift and He expects you to use that gift for the good of humanity, and you will be blessed and rewarded for it. But that gift is work. It's the talents, right? When Jesus tells the story of the talents, we get caught up in the idea that the talent is some fund or some money or some amount, but the talent is the gift inside of you. And For many people, they're the ones hiding their gift under a rock because they're afraid to let it out. They're afraid of making an impact or a splash in the world. They're afraid of rejection, and fear holds them back, just like the person in scripture buries it under the dirt because they're afraid of losing it. Versus the other two who used the talents and doubled them. Well, that's what happens when you use your gifts and talents. You learn another thing and you learn another level, but it still belongs to God, and you're still no greater than you were before. And I think that's the piece, right, that happens to these leaders like Joan of Arc and these leaders in some of these mega churches that become greatness among themselves. And they think they've done all this on their own because somehow they've lost sight of God's blessing and God's requirement of, hey, you just got to acknowledge the source. You got to stay connected to the source. The source is really where all the power is. And when you lose the connection, which is sin, right? Sin is what? Separation from God. It means you've lost the connection. You've got to stay plugged into the source, or the world will just suck you up. And I think obviously Satan's after those leaders that are influencing thousands and thousands because he wants to shut them down. And so he's going to put temptations in their path that are going to cause them to make mistakes, and he's going to shut them down. You know, the great thing is Hillsong's bigger than one leader. Hillsong's bigger than it's a movement, and they're going to continue to influence. And I'm heartbroken for people that got hurt. But the truth is God's going to prevail, and his kingdom will prevail. And those of us that manage to stay plugged into his kingdom are going to receive the blessings, and we're going to use it to multiply the kingdom.
How can we stay away from, or how can a person stay away from judging God on man's inconsistencies?
Whew. Well, just recognize, you just said it. It's man's inconsistencies, right? Recognize that humanity is broken. And as long as humanity's in charge, they're going to stay broken, and we're going to mess stuff up. And I think recognizing that God's power works through us imperfectly. One of my favorite activities now is watching The Chosen, the largest crowdfunded project in history. But they've done such a great job of showing the humanity of the disciples and the humanity of Christ. And the stories just really tap into, and for me, the faith. Jesus, he heals people, but he asks them, you just need to believe. And we get so caught up in believing Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, blah, blah, blah. No, you need to believe that you can be healed. Believe that there's the power of God, right? And that's where the belief is. It's not the belief in this structure or this system or these rules or even God's word. It's just belief that the Creator wants you whole, that the Creator wants to give you abundance, that there's greatness inside of you, that you were designed to do something to impact the world. That's what you need to believe. And that belief is what's going to create great things in the world and in the kingdom. And yes, it's through the power of Christ. And yes, it is because he conquered death. But we're so caught up in the doctrine and the belief, this magical formula, and say this magical prayer and everything's woo. No, it's believe that God created you for greatness and put that greatness into work.
How are you able to, because you do it so masterfully, but how are you able to toe the line of being able to help people to be successful in their business world, right? So I'm saying that's a part of the world. And then you're also saying that you got to keep to these principles in your faith and in your heart. So I find that people generally will have people choose. Like, you choose your heart, you go and you be the artist and you love what you do, or you kind of toss that to the side a little bit and then you go hard charging after making as much as you possibly can. But you seem to be able to teach people and base your add value to life off of that. How have you been able to do that?
Well, God didn't create us to live in two worlds with a foot in this one and a foot in that one. He created us to live in his creation. And the world in spite of whether they know it or not, are living in his creation. The greatness around us is because of his vibe, right? Because the buildings, right? God gave those architects the vision of creating a skyscraper. God's given people the vision of industry and the vision of creating, things better for humanity. Those have all come from God. There's no separation between living in the world and creating art and greatness. The separation has come in our own minds and the stories we tell ourselves that well, I can go to work 9 to 5 and I can do this job thing and pretend like I don't have a relationship with God. But really all I'm doing is trying to block it out and pretend like it doesn't exist. But the truth is it exists. It's all around us. It's everywhere. And so why not just lean into it? Why not just do your life as if God is everywhere around you and be okay with it. That doesn't mean that I go spouting off that, hey, Jesus loves you everywhere I go. I still hang out with people in a bar and have conversations. I'm not drinking. That's a choice of mine. But that doesn't mean that I guess the biggest challenge is not judging people, right? I'm trying really hard to leave the judgment to God. I just want to encourage people that I believe God has given you a great gift inside of you to impact humanity in some way. I don't know what that is. You have to figure that out. And if you step into it, really cool things can happen for you. Like some people's greatness is being a doctor, right? And those that step into that and are amazing, God empowers them to save lives and do incredible things. Some people's greatness is to create art and billboards and maybe it's graffiti, but find a way to do it and impact lives with your greatness, right? Let the greatness flow out of you. But trust me, there's something inside of you that God created to impact humanity. Each one of us is given. That's what's so cool about entrepreneurship, right? Because entrepreneurs solve problems. Who do we solve problems for? People. If you're solving problems for people, you're making an impact. You're doing something that makes a difference. And I think that's what God created us as humans to do. There's too many humans out there spending all their time judging others, putting boxes around other people so we can label them. And instead of leaning in and saying, man, what can I do for you? How can I make your day better? How can I have, man, imagine if each one of us was just seeking to make everyone else's day better instead of figuring out, man, that guy's got curly hair and dreads and he's wearing a t-shirt and a baseball hat. Like, I'm not talking to him, right? Judgment is so prevalent, including in the church, outside the church. I mean, we judge people for what they wear, what they drive, where they work, what they do. And really it's about learning to let go of judgment, because scripture is very clear. That's God's job. He's the only one that can do it right. He's the only one that can do it. And so why am I spending my time judging people for their life, judging people for their lifestyle, expecting people to fit my little mold? That's not my responsibility. And I think that's the biggest challenge for the church, is letting go of judgment in order to truly love.
So even outside of the church, what are some practices that you could do? Because there are times, like, I mean, and maybe Robert, you seem like a perfect guy. I fall a lot though, man. Like, I'll be in the grocery store, and say, for instance, I was at Universal Studios the other day. Okay, I'm with my son. This is a blissful time. We're in line for Mario Kart. It's a heralded game. We paid a little bit more to be able to get in early. We're standing in line, doing my thing. I'm right with my son. And this dude with his lady, with no kids, walks right up in front of me. Like, literally cuts right in line. And I looked at him and I was like, man, there's a line, right? You know what I'm saying? Because I was thinking, like, I got to show my son, like, I got to be a man, whatever it is. And as Christian as I am, and as much as I love the Lord, and as much as I want to not judge, I was judging that dude. Like, who raised you, brother? Who raised you that you're going to walk up in this line and not even make eye contact with me? But I had to step back. Like, so how can a person that's going through that, like, I want to punch a dude in his throat. And this was for Mario Kart. Like, this wasn't a major thing. It was a major thing for me at the time. How do I get through that? Like, what are some practices that I could do so I don't judge him and I add a little bit of Robert Peterson and I add value to this guy's life?
Well, that's a huge challenge, right? Is how do we love those that are operating outside of our own moral code, right? I mean, because our moral code would say, "Hey, dude, there's a line. Like, check it out." And yet, there's a space where I can say, "Well, I guess you're more important than me, and you belong up front of me." You know, I,
Robert, you're killing me here, man. I don't know if I'm going to let him in front of me and my son. I'm trying to add value to his life. I wanted to shorten his life that day.
well, that's true. You add value by sending him to Jesus.
I'll send him home to Elizabeth is what I'll do. I'm just joking. He probably would have knocked me out.
But you brought up the truth in that, though, right? By telling yourself that, dude, it's just a ride. Like, really, right? And in every situation, it's just this thing, right? And I think, when Peter talks to Jesus and we get caught up in the whole forgiveness thing, the church doesn't really teach forgiveness in the way that I think Jesus intended it. We get this forgiveness between two parties, right? Like, this other person has to be involved, and if I forgive them, then I've said whatever they did was okay, and we're letting it go. No, forgiveness is a you and you deal. It's a Kelly and Kelly deal to let it go that this guy stepped in front of you, right? Now, the challenge is when Peter asked Jesus, well, should I forgive him 7 times, which is double the Jewish rule? So Peter thought he was being really generous at the time. And Jesus says, no, it's 70 times 7. And I think it's really this mindset, right? It's this thing because it's going to keep coming back in your head. It's going to keep coming back. Oh, he did that. Oh, he did that. Oh, he did that. And it's really, Jesus is saying it's a mindset shift that you have to make over and over and over again to let it go. And forgiveness is really about 3 things. It's about, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. And I'm not going to allow it to impact my decisions. And that's truly letting it go. So when somebody's offended you and somebody's stepped on your toes and somebody's done something that crossed you, even a friend, a relative, a loved one, a wife, you make a commitment to, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. And I'm not going to let it impact my decisions. That's what forgiveness is, which means over and over again, when it comes back in your head, oh, that dude just stood in front of me and cut in line, and we missed the front of the coaster ride because that guy was in front of us. No, I said, I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm going to quit thinking about it and letting it machine around in my head.
So, Robert, you talked about before we started the recording also of a path that you took, which is a pretty common path, right? And when I say a common path, it means that you were in ministry for 20 years. You had a kind of light bulb turn on, and you went through to the entrepreneurial space because you wanted to help people to overcome this one thing inside the church and a lot of times in ministry that nobody ever talks about. It's like the little dark corner that everyone knows is there, but they never really talk about. Can you talk about this transition and why you did it and why it was so important to you?
Well, at the time I did it because my job basically got taken away. And so I was in a ministry position, and I also was really gifted at taking care of a building and knowing all the elements of the building. And I was literally being asked to stop ministering to people and be responsible for a building. So that's why I made the decision. The leadership had changed at the church, and they were asking me to no longer be in ministry, basically, and take care of a building. And God didn't call me to take care of a building. He called me to take care of people. And then I stepped into entrepreneurship partly because my family was here, my wife worked here, and I didn't want to leave the state. But as I've come to recognize my story and recognize this journey that God's had me on, everywhere I've worked, and South America, the places I've traveled all over the world, in Africa and Cuba and Indonesia and Eastern Europe, people come to faith and they get involved in this ministries and they love Jesus and they're changing, their character's changing, they're trying to make different decisions, but their lives don't really change. Their lives don't change. They go to the same job, they've got the same position, they don't have any more opportunity. They're stuck. And the reason they're stuck is because poverty is just all around them, and they're enveloped in it, and they don't think there's any other way out. And the church is afraid to teach that there's a way out. The church is afraid to teach business strategies. The church is afraid to teach how to empower people to be their own bosses. And so entrepreneurs just kind of fell into my radar, because entrepreneurs are so much like the missionaries that I was helping in all of these other countries. They're independent spirits, and they're doing something that no one else is willing to do, and they've sacrificed a lot to make it happen. And then I realized that, you know what? Why are we so afraid to talk about making money? And I've tried to study the scriptures, and it's very interesting to read some of the scriptures that people use to talk about money. And when you read them straight, just read the words, it's very easy to feel like there's this competition between God and money. And if you set yourself up to believe that there's this competition between God and money, you lose and Satan wins. The truth is, if you make money your God, then you're making a mistake. That's where we get caught up in the wrong direction, because God uses money to build his kingdom. God used money in the Old Testament to build his temple, to build his kingdom. Some of the richest people in history were part of the church, were part of the kingdom. And yes, Jesus came into this world in a different way. He was different than the religious leaders who had money. He was different than the religious people who had churches and temples and places of worship. He had to be different. But even Jesus' teaching, Jesus says, I came to give them life, and I came to give it to them abundantly. And so Jesus wanted them to have abundance. And I believe that if you can separate those two and recognize that money is really the flow of God's blessing. It is God's movement of action. So money is God in action. And if you can see money in that way and not as the ultimate ends, right? And I think that's the challenge. Our culture has taught us that money is the end, right? We work for money. We work for a paycheck. We work to get the money, but it's never about the money. You never just keep the money sitting around. No, you use the money to buy your house and take care of your kids and do all the things in your family and go out to Universal Studios and get mad at some dude in line. Money is what makes all those things possible. So we have to start seeing money as not something from the government. It's not dollar bills. It's not Visa. It's not any of those things. No, money is God's flow into us of power and force. And when we use it to give back to others, that's when money can do great things. And then it no longer becomes this thing I have to hold on to and grab onto, because that stops the flow, right? And that's the crazy part, right? We've got all these limitations and things that are stopping the flow instead of opening it up. And I think when we open it up and we start to, all you need to do is give a bit. You don't even have to give a ton. Just give a bit. If you're giving a bit, you're opening up the flow. And every time you open that valve, great things happen. And God gave us these talents inside of us to create wealth and use that wealth for his kingdom. The more we create, the more we can give away. The more we create, the more impact we can have in changing people's lives. A broke person can't feed his family, right? But a rich person can feed his family and 100 others. That's what God intended.
So what about the scripture? And I believe it was, probably you're going to correct me on this one, but I believe it was Paul, and Paul said, don't give me so little that it causes me to steal. Don't give me so much that I'll forget about you. Give me just enough of my daily bread.
Yeah, and I think there is this element of what is enough. And I think Jesus talks about those who use their talents well will be given more. And so there is this place, there is this line. And the reason people stay broke is because they stay below that line, because, well, we're lazy and we don't do anything, and we don't want to make an impact, and we don't want to step into our greatness. And so we stay in our little comfort zone and we stay safe, right? The brain's job is to keep us alive and keep us safe. And it's still trying to protect us from the lion outside the door that's bound to eat us if we walk outside and do something amazing, right? And I think being in that space, most people are complacent. Our culture has built us to be complacent and content. And it's those people that are a little discontent that are going to step into their greatness and step into the potential of making an impact. And when you realize that, look, I can't just change my family's life, I can change hundreds of lives and thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives. That's when God says, look what he's doing. And not that he's doing it, but he's using the gift that I gave him, and he's doing what he's supposed to do. And that's the impact. That's when God's going to say, whoo, let's put it down that chute, because that chute's moving, that flow is going, and he's making a difference in lives. That's the things that hold so many people back and keep them in that just enough. God's going to give you just enough. And most people are satisfied with just enough. But just enough isn't going to create a kingdom. Just enough isn't going to build great things. Just enough isn't going to get impact that touches lives and changes people. And there's plenty of causes, there's plenty of things and opportunities that people are creating that impact lives, whether it be homelessness or healthcare or veterans or whatever it is. If you're doing something for the greatness and goodness of humanity, God's going to follow it up, and he's going to just fill it up with greatness, because that's what he does for the people that are stepping into their greatness.
How do we keep the testimony in line? Because what I find is a lot of times when that happens, and you see it, then the testimony of that is, I took my gift, I did this, come and follow me, like John Dark, come and follow me, I'll teach you. And when I teach you, it's going to cost you a little bit, but I'm going to teach you how to do it the way that I did. And then the testimony becomes all about them, as opposed to shining the light on where the power came from. How do we, I don't believe in balance. How do we keep it in line as we prosper, whether it be financially, in our relationship, whatever? Because it's so easy to ask God, like, will you please help me, God, when things are tough? But when it's good, it's like, this was me.
Well, that's the bottom line. You're forgetting the source.
How do we remember the source? Like, what can we do every day to remember the source, Robert?
I mean, for me, it's prayer and Bible. I read the Bible every single day.
What if a person doesn't believe in the Bible and doesn't believe, like, when you talk about prayer or whatever it is, what can a person do?
They still can meditate and acknowledge the source, right? Recognize that we are just conduits, man. We are just tools. I'm just a tool in the toolbox that happens to be activated, right? And the power tool, the battery's charged and things are working. And I got to recognize that if I don't keep that battery charged, it's going to run out. And if my ego runs that battery out, then I get what I get and I deserve it, right? If I keep the battery charged and I keep connected to source, I think the battery will keep flowing, because I'm doing good in the world and making an impact in the world. And I think that's the line, right? That some of those leaders cross, and we've seen what happens when they cross it. They fall pretty hard. But there's also leaders like John Maxwell, like Billy Graham, that have gone on and had a successful finish right to the end, because they've kept God first. They've kept the source in front of them and said, I'm doing this for the source. The source is empowering me. The source is fueling me. The source is guiding me. And I think when you can keep that perspective, it kind of helps keep that ego from saying, ooh, look what I did. Ooh, look at me. Right. And we see it throughout history. We see it in scripture scriptural history too, where, you know, kings and leaders get egos and then they blow it, and because they're doing it on their own power versus acknowledging the source and acknowledging the power that's simply using us to get these things done.
Robert, what were some of the adversities that helped you to be able to get to this point of wisdom? Unless, I mean, maybe it is that you were just dropped from heaven and God just gave you all this wisdom. But I find that most wisdom comes from lumps on the head and kicks in the face. So what were some of those things? Because when a person's hearing this, I'm like, I mean, if you're listening, you better be taking notes. If you're watching, you better be taking notes, or just listen to it again and write it down. But so many people are inspired by it and they're like, wow, yeah, Robert, that's amazing. And then they're like, yeah, Robert, but my life kind of sucks right now. Like, I'm going through a place where maybe I agree with Kelly. He was petty in the line where he wanted to punch a dude in the throat, but I'm feeling that right now. And I'm not in a place where I'm kind of stoic and got all my wisdom like Robert. So what are some of those adversities that you went through in your life?
Hey, well, let's be real. Like, there's definitely times when I've wanted to punch somebody in the face. The difference is I'm a small guy and small guys don't start fights. I mean, obviously, so, you know, living as a missionary.
What's the biggest misstep that you did that you couldn't hide, that you just got you just got mopped up?
Great question. Gosh, there's been plenty. Like, you know, when we first started this business, like, obviously I had ambitious goals. I still have ambitious goals, but 2 years ago, my wife had a near death experience. She nearly died, had, 13 days in the hospital. She has a scar from stem to stern on her chest because they had to do open heart surgery to save her life. And I swore she wouldn't have to go back to work. I swore I'd make this business function at a high enough level that she wouldn't have to go back to work. And I couldn't do it. And a year later, she went back to work, and then she finally just said, "I've had enough. I can't do it. I got to quit." And so at that point, to support two incomes in our house, she needed drugs. She needed medicine still, right? So she's on a heart medicine and a blood pressure medicine and things to keep her alive, to maintain her health. And so we ended up on Medicaid and food stamps and for me, that's like kicking the freaking teeth. Like, dude, what are you doing? That this is where you are. And yet, even in the midst of it, I never lost faith that we were doing the right thing, that the right thing was happening, that we were talking to the right people, we were treating people the right way, we were teaching the right things. And so even in the midst of not having anything, maxing out credit cards to go from month to month to keep the house and the food, and then she had to get on Medicaid because I had no other way to get the medicine. There was no other, like, I couldn't just go buy it over the counter. Like, these are prescription drugs. You have to have a doctor, and the only way to get a doctor was to go to a doctor's appointment, and the only way to do that was Medicaid because I couldn't pay the insurance. And so yeah, man, that was a kick in the teeth. And yet I never lost faith that we were doing the right thing, that this was what we were supposed to do. This was where we're supposed to go. And how you get caught up in the marketing, and you get caught up in the, which little thing is going to open the door, which little, what's going to make the right thing happen. And it was keep keeping on. And God's coming through. Like, it's coming through. And my wife still doesn't, my wife's making her own income now. We separated 2 months ago because when she quit her job, her intention was to be my back room and admin, and not put her face in front of audiences. And this last year, couple of our coaches and advisors basically said, you guys got to split up. You got to, and not split up our marriage. We've been married 32 years and have an incredible relationship.
Yeah.
Split up our business.
Yeah.
And so my wife is working with women, and she's leaning into women's lives, and she's created a course and other things. And now the craziest affiliate opportunities are just being dropped in her lap. Like she's on that leading edge. And all of a sudden these people are saying, hey, we're going to give you 10% of everything, all the business that we do, because you were up here helping us.
Yeah.
And so her business, she's being paid. She's getting paid for working from her living room through this computer and in her own mode, her own deal, instead of just, her propping me up, which is what her mission or what she thought her purpose was going to be. And now we each have a business that's growing and thriving, and yet we're still completely connected and completely, operating in our greatness. And so it's awesome to see my wife step into her greatness. And, the first month that she made $1,000 online, she's like, that's the, it's the least money she's ever made in a month, but it's the coolest money she's ever made because she did it on her own. And it wasn't because of me, or it wasn't because of a job. It was because of her doing the work and getting the people and getting people to give her money to help them. And so, yeah, the hardest thing is sometimes sticking it out and knowing that you're doing the right thing, but getting the right coaches. And so when you're flat broke, busted, and you're on Medicaid and food stamps, and you feel like I need a coach, you still got to find somebody to mentor you. And I met a mentor at a networking event, and I just kept reaching out to him, and I had made a wrong turn in my business. I'd completely tried to go into a niche I shouldn't have gone into. And I was thinking, oh man, these people, they've got money. They're struggling in the areas that I can help them with. And they feel like they hate their business. Like they're the perfect clients, but they're also the kind of client that takes 9 months to make a decision to hire somebody. And they want experts in their field. And because they've spent 15 years going to school to be an expert, and they're arrogant and they're cocky. And I can't work with arrogant and cocky very well yet. I'm getting there, but I had a mentor straight up tell me, dude, you're going the wrong way. Like you need to stop and turn, because you're going to crash and burn. And so being willing to let other people speak into your lives makes such a difference, but you've got to be in the right room, and you've got to be among the right people that believe in what you're doing. And they're not looking at your checkbook to see, oh, is he really doing it? No, they're watching what you're doing, and they're seeing what you're doing, and they're saying, you're doing great things, and we want to invite you into the room. And then when you're in the room, you got to listen to the people that are there saying, whoa, you sure that's right? Because those are the people. Don't be in the poor room and the broke room and the mother-in-law room where they're saying, oh, wait, starting your own business? You can't do that. That'll never work. That's a different room, right?
Robert, how do you know when your faith is real?
Man, I'll tell you, that's a great question. And I'm going to be honest, man. God and I have had some talks, and I've really, really, really wrestled with the church, because I've been hurt. I've been hurt by her. I've been, I was hurt in my own church. I've been hurt in other churches, and I've seen this relationship with Christ and the priority of that in a different light, and so being able to separate the church and separate other people from who Christ is and what Christ means to me has been pretty powerful. So I still go to church. I'm not overly over the moon over it like I had been in the past. But more and more, my faith is more and more personal and more relational with Jesus directly. And I still encourage people to be involved in a church. You need a church to grow. You need a community to be a part of that's going to protect you from the craziness around. But I think being open to this possibility that Jesus is something bigger and different and better than even the church promotes him as, because the church still has some of these limitations and traditions, and the church is really judgmental, and it can't let go of that. I don't know. The church struggles with women in leadership, and the church struggles with loving people in our culture that are different than the church wants them to be. And when you step outside of the bounds of the church, it's easier to love people that are, sometimes you want to punch in the face. but but it's easier to step back and not judge them for that, right? And you know what? The more I see humanity, the more I recognize I don't know why that guy thinks he can step in front of me, and I don't know why him and his son are more important than me and my son, but maybe they are, and maybe I got to be okay with that. And so letting go of that is really where I can find myself letting go of judgment and letting go of judging people for what they wear, how they dress, how they choose to describe themselves. Like, man, these are things we're grabbing onto and making laws about and rules about and putting people in boxes. And I just don't see Jesus doing that. And I just see Jesus trying to love people where they're at. And because where they're at is struggling, and they need somebody that just says, hey, you know what? I love you. I, I don't understand it. And it's a struggle for me, but I love you. And how can I help you?
So, Robert, I started the podcast because of my kids, Maddox and McKenna. Maddox is 11 years old, and
What a great age.
amazing kid. We went to last year. We went to Fresno, and he was so excited about going to Fresno. He was so excited about going through security at the airport. When we got to the hotel, he was so excited to go to the hotel at Universal Studios. Meanwhile, we're going to Universal Studios, but he was as excited about the hotel itself. And so he's just this joyous kid that brings this crazy, amazing vibe into every single thing that he does. And then I got my daughter who's 14. Her name is McKenna. And McKenna, she does not ease up on her daddy at all. We were just watching The Wonder Years, laying on the couch and today, and she just gives me the business. I'm asking her questions. She's like, Dad, we're watching this right now. So she's got this amazing heart, phenomenal, talent for the arts. But I wanted to take those two, and I wanted to show them iconic people like yourself and show them that there was no idols in life to worship, but just icons that they could be inspired by that had phenomenal attitudes and incredible work ethic. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
Well, Maddox and McKenna, lean into your daddy and your mom and just experience their love, and then allow that love to flow through you to others in your life. Discipline hurts and it's necessary, but that's the difference between discipline and control, is that we discipline those that we love because we want to make them better. So allow your parents to discipline you and recognize that it's making you better because it's done out of love. And that's what our world needs. That's love. That's love that cares, right? We discipline our children because we love them and we want the very best for them. It turns into abuse when it becomes about control. And I'll admit, I wasn't the greatest dad. I wasn't the perfect dad. But I made home a safe space. And I apologized to my kids when I screwed it up. But my kids always knew that they were loved, no matter what happened, no matter how I yelled or how I reacted in a moment. They knew they were loved. And so I'm proud to say that my adult children call me more today than they did when they were teenagers, than they did when they were, growing up. And we've walked through some stuff. We've walked through some stuff that the church couldn't handle and doesn't handle well yet. Both my kids had children out of wedlock and unintentional pregnancies. And that's when you find out who your friends are. That's when you find out who's judging and who's loving, because it's a reality that the church doesn't know how to deal with. It's outside their box still. And yet our culture's dealing with it on a regular basis. Because guess what? Kids are having sex. Kids in college are having sex. Kids in high school are having sex. And as much as you want to believe your kids aren't going to, they're probably going to have sex. And so, man, being able to love them and walk through life with them and just promise them that, you know what, no matter how stupid you get, what big mistake you make, I'm going to love you and I'm going to walk with you. And there may be consequences. There may be consequences that cost you money. There may be consequences that cost you time, but you will never face those consequences alone.
Robert, you have been absolutely phenomenal, and I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be on your podcast. I mean, Robert's got a top-rated podcast, and if you're not listening to it, you need to listen to it. This man not only has the wisdom, but also you give people the opportunity to be able to speak, and that's a rare art, man. And I want to thank you for it, man. I want to thank you for your spirit. I want to thank you for your wisdom, and I want to thank you for your vulnerability in speaking about, some of the things that you spoke about today. And just being real, I just think is amazing. And I really, really, really appreciate you, my brother.
Well, Kelly, I appreciate you for the opportunity just to have a conversation together. And the fact that we recorded it and other people get to listen to it is just a bonus to me.
Well, now's the time to do exactly what you know you should do. Check out all of our sponsors. Check out Mr. Chris Nagel. Check out Mr. Jim DiGiulio at Findlay, Volvo, Cars of Las Vegas. And a new sponsor of the podcast, which Maddox is so excited about because his favorite food is popcorn. And Poppington's Popcorn reached out, and I know the guy's veteran-owned, and just an absolutely phenomenal company. And so check that out. I asked Maddox the other day, we were at Universal Studios and they had a popcorn store. And I said, son, what do you think about that popcorn? He's like, I ain't eating it. And I said, why not? And he's like, because it's not Poppington's. So that's how much of an impact that brand has had on my son. So, but check out all the sponsors. Do what you know you need to do. Thank you all for watching, listening, sharing, and helping us to get in the top 1% globally. And we appreciate you more than ever. Robert, it has been a pleasure. We want to have you on the show again. And you are officially off the hot seat.